Well, hello everyone. Here to show you right here. I'll talk about for math digits right here, and talking about right here whenever it comes to doing the source of math though, and let's just say that if we're talking about $100,000 right here, and I'm sure that most of us have probably have done what you call the calculations to where that you'll imagine, or if you want to call it causes to where that setting a goal toward that this is about how much money that you would like to save in the near future, or if it's like what you call just to kind of just to experiment around with a lot of it. But a lot of times it sure seems that way to where that whenever we talk about being more confident with our savings, a lot of times it sure seems that way. That the first thing that we think about when we talk about savings, though, is that the first thing that you are going to probably think about, and you're going to maybe highlight that in red and saying that it cannot be done. That cannot be done. So it sure seems that way that you more like are going to maybe tell somebody that really that for the most part that whenever it comes to coming up with any sorts of savings, and let's just say that doing like what you call the typical positive thinking right here is to where that can't be done just because over the fact about you just knowing doing the measurements of talking about the amount of money that is coming in and compared to how much that is coming out, right? But the way we think about this, though, is that really that do we kind of call that anything such as maybe the purple flag, or if it's the red flag or anything like that, or maybe the silver flag or something like that. But whenever we talk about $100,000 at 100,000 bucks, and then the 500 bucks right here. And a lot of times you want to know too is toward what seems to be the bigger number right here. And we are thinking too is toward if we were to change that to 199, do you think that that would be a bigger number? And at the time you want to know too, do you think that maybe that you would have a better luck with building any sorts of savings amount just by using those numbers there than compared to using 00, and for sure that is to where, well, really, if you add any zeros to these amounts of money in digits, and even if we're talking about for tax amounts, then does that include the taxes, or does that exclude the taxes or anything like that, and plus interest? So if we were to ask that question to where that whenever it comes to rounding our digits and adding our digits, though, is that if we were to go ahead and put, 0 and then period, and maybe 390 right there, and so let's just say that on average, though, that you're going to use it as like a math like a rounding, a source of a rounding problem, and it sure seems that way to where that really that. Whenever it comes to understanding about our basic math, though, that you want to know too that the first thing that you're going to be thinking about is to where that by the time you get what you want, then you'll be good, right? Like everybody else would say too, that whenever you do see the offering get bigger, then you know for sure that somebody's going to be, they're going to be well behaved and be good, and you know how that is that talking about for who's going to be in charge of keeping track of this and keeping track of that. If it's really about the fact about who wins and who loses the competition or anything like that. But let's just say on average, though, that if we would actually do the calculations right here, and at 102, that if you were to go ahead and put on here is to where that can be done. And so let's just say that if we were to be thinking about it as to where that we're really for what can be done. And I can go and highlight that in blue right here, and like everybody else is want to know too, that the way we think about the math right here, most of the time what I usually think about is guessing, to where if you were to guess correctly to a math problem, and for sure that somebody's going to go ahead and give you an award, just for configuring those correct math digits. So let's just say that on average, though, that if we were to do any source of math problem, and let's just say that if we were to go ahead and add on there, maybe the source of maybe if it's a time on the multiplication problem or something like that equals to how much or something like that. So when we think about the math a lot of times, that are we necessarily thinking about whenever it comes to one 000 dot 000 dot for comma 00 right there. So if we're talking about for up to how much would that be? Maybe up to 1 million, and like if I can remember like how many zeros are equal to 1 million, and I could probably count up to 8 zeros altogether. 8 zeros equals to up to 1 million, and for sure that like anybody say too that if you were to change it to 999 and then the 999 to 99 right there. And half the time you want to know too that really that why is it that maybe that the offering could not be even for that much, and especially when we're talking about maybe like on a tax return or something like that. But it sure seems that way that that if you were to change it to 999, then it's basically another way of stating toward well really that's not equal to I'm like everybody else would say too, if we could maybe change the cash dollar amounts to those amounts right there, those amounts right there do not really add up to even amounts. So it sure seems that way, that whenever we think about that way, I talk about the typical allowance though, that how many of us will be able to think is to where if you were to try to round up those digits and 102 is to where that talk about for like an allowance, like any source of allowance. And you'll want to know too that with most of the time with the allowance, that when we speak about an allowance, that when we speak about allowances though, allowances paid to each person and each individual though, that are we necessarily thinking about 10%? Are we necessarily thinking about to where that for how much that based on it, the fact about for who gets paid fairly, and let's just say that maybe if it is based on any source of agreement to like a settlement or something like that. And a lot of times I usually see this, and maybe in like business math, or maybe if we're doing the calculations based on insurance claims or something like that. But at the time you want to know too that as to where if you were to take a guess to a math problem, and let's just say if you were to configure the digits, like something like this right here, and the U102 is toward it, would you spend your time trying to figure out, okay, for who's right and who's wrong about certain things, math facts, right? So let's just say that if you were to start out the math problem by saying something like, for 150, 89 right there. So you don't really see very many zeros in that math problem. And a lot of times U102 is to where that really, would you add an extra penny or an extra dollar to that? Maybe only at the fact about if you were, somebody were to, say that, that they'll take your word for it to where if you're right or if you're wrong about a certain calculation. But a lot of times what I usually think about is toward a lot of times in favors is that somebody is willing to pay you, a penny more or a dollar more, maybe if you are correct on solving a certain math problem, or if you're willing to do the favors, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way to when we do the calculations right here, that you want to know too that that people are willing to be good maybe if they see those the bigger numbers. And so a lot of times it's like, well, really that you see right here, not for 99 right there, but you see 00 right there, but then you're going to change those. I'm like, for the cents. So let's just say that if you were to increase the salary to like everybody else would say too, that you change that to a 9 right there. So let's just say on average though that you say at 9 right there, you say that to 90, and 9, and then and half the time you want to know too that you move that over right there, but it sure seems that way that yeah. Go ahead and put 9 right there for 90 right there. But still, I'm trying to change. I'm like, yeah, from 99 right there. But half the time, it sure seems that way that when we're trying to do the math configuration right here, and a 102 that you talk about for 999 right there and 99. And so it sure seems that way that whenever those numbers get bigger, that are we necessarily thinking about the fact about that yeah, somebody they'll be somebody will be good maybe if they see the offering get bigger, but on the other hand too, that sure seems that way to where that well really that the offering that gets bigger or smaller, right? But it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to understanding about the basic math facts, though, that whenever we actually do the calculations right here of the math facts, that it's like, yeah, you see 599 right there and then 999 right there. But still, that, a lot of times it's like, really, that for any reason at all that you're going to be doing the math facts right here and go by, say, for 199, that 199 right there. And it sure seems that way, like everybody else would say too, is to where that, really, if the number gets to be too big, then it's not going to be easily pronounced. So you want to know too that why don't we just call these nicknames, particular nicknames, to where the triple digit offering or something like that. So at the time you want to know too that why is it that maybe that we don't give these math facts any sort of nickname, or maybe name any sorts of groups or whichever you want to call it. But the way I think about too that when we speak about math problems a lot of times, that do we necessarily think about too much of time about 000, that comma 000, comma 000, and we're waiting for this amount to get bigger, or compared to getting smaller right here. So it sure seems that way that if we were to actually do the math right here, that it sure seems that way to where that yeah, well, really, people are willing to maybe to do business, maybe about the fact about if you see that offering get bigger. And so it sure seems that way. They talk about for $100,000 right here. And to me, though, that I'm like 102 is toward yeah, well, that's the amount of money that maybe that you would like to save in the near future, right? But let's just say, though, that if we're talking about is this toward yeah, well, really, that if we're talking about a particular credit card, or maybe if we're talking about the amount of money that you could be paid for an allowance or something like that, but still, that but the way we think about that, though, is that if we were to round those digits up right here, and we're talking about that amount right there is going to be big enough to where that not everybody's going to really know, how to pronounce it. And we're talking about maybe by the time the 23rd century comes around, and you want to know too is toward it, yeah, that there's going to be around a time to where that maybe yeah, $500 is not gonna be equal to the same amount. Like, and at the time you want to know too that how come that we don't have very many dollar coins too much, instead of dollar bills, that they ought to start making $500 coins in the near future. And you want to know too is to where that the way the stock market is nowadays, and that you want to know too is to where that if they're going to maybe start having it to where they start making these at $500 coins. Your $500 coins is toward it. Yeah, well, really, they're going to be hard to find. I mean, even if they do start making coin designs made for $500 each, and you want to know too is toward about what you think that the value's worth would be that you need, even if we are talking about any sorts of stocks or anything like that. But the way I think about it too, though, that whenever it comes to 199, comma 199, and then to 99 right here, and you want to know too is toward that do you think that that this math problem could get any bigger, other than the fact about if you put your 1 comma 888 right here, and then 888, and then put a comma right there for 77. So at the time you were in 02 that really that we don't need these math facts to make it look like the year right here. And like every time we think about these math equations or something like these rounding digits right here, then why is it that's going to maybe remind you of the year, to where you go ahead and set a year, and I'll go ahead and set a year right here to where that if we're talking about for March, by March 17th, you want to use 17th right there, or do you want to use 10th right there? By March 10th, 10th, by March 10th, of 2023, right here. So let's just say if we were to use that date in particular, and at 102 is toward it, really that, so if we were to use that date in particular, though, that, even if we're going to be using that even on our tax return right there, that, U102 is toward it, looking at a lot of these digits right here, that it's already starting to look like a few phone numbers, to be quite honest with you, everybody. They don't really look like too many cash dollar amounts. So, like anybody says, to where if you're trying to write down a certain amount in particular on maybe about how much a bill is going to cost or whichever, and at U102 is to where that each time you look at that, and at U102 is to where that if you were to try to enter that into a calculator online, you more likely would probably say too that either we don't count that decimal as a rounding fraction, or if anything that it's going to include, it's going to encounter a lot of errors, because it's possible that if we were to actually do these rounding facts even on a calculator, then more likely it's going to say is to where if the amount gets any bigger than the 75,000 or something like that, then you know for sure it's that like I talk about for the rounding facts, but it sure seems that way, that every time we thinking about any source of math, though, that it seems like to me, though, that whenever it comes to rounding numbers, though, that do you think that maybe the bigger that they are, then maybe that the harder that they're going to be to pronounce. And especially if we're talking about for one, I'm like, if we're talking about for 199, for $1,999,999.99 right here. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, to where that really that do you really want to go ahead and read that off and then go ahead and try to pronounce that again, or like anybody will probably say too that when we talking about the basic math right here, that you might say is to where if the number gets to be too big right there, then why don't you just leave that as 0? And or I'll say, whenever it comes to the cent sign right there, and you're probably thinking too, if the number gets to be too big, then you might as well go ahead and just say it's like to take off, go ahead and take off the the nines right there and just put 00 right there. But like everybody else would say too, if it was all an even amount right here, and let's just say if it's at 78.0 right there, can you really even use it? And so it sure seems that way, that when we talking about doing the math right here, that U102 is to where that you're going to be thinking ahead of time, right? And let's just say that between now and maybe by the time we work our taxes for next year, and by the time we round up all these digits, though, that it's possible that you're going to maybe be seeing the facts about that is toward that you actually earned about $7 more for the next year than compared to what you calculated from the previous year. So a lot of times people are going to be asking the questions a lot of times. Is that how is it that you were able to kind of configure that amount whenever the last time that you put on your forms is toward that you made $5 less than compared to the previous year. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that when we do the calculations right here, that maybe a lot of times, like tax season will probably say, is to where you just cannot, you just cannot really assume what the digits are, and even if you tried, that anybody says too, is to where that that's why it's also important to where if you're going to be doing your configurations using any sorts of Excel file or a Word document, that you can go ahead and just assume the math problems that way, but then by the time you actually do the tax configuration on the actual tax documents, and you can actually do the counting there, and like I say, is to where the main reason why you did this is just because of the fact that just to kind of give you an idea about as to where that you would actually like to set a goal to where this is how much money that you would like to make, or just to see what happens about if you did add up all those digits. But at the same time, we're also thinking too is to where that if you add up the digits enough to the point to where that it's going to be hard to pronounce those digits, especially. So like everybody else would say too, that how much money are you making per hour at your job than compared to last year. And so let's just say that including bonuses, that let's just say that recently that you made it this much. Recently from your job, that this is how much money that you made, and maybe in bonuses, but then this is how much money you make per hour. So let's just say if it's So let's just say on average though that the minimum wage goes up, and let's just say that on average though that you put on your tax return for next year that you assume is toward that this is how much that's going to be on our tax return by the year 2022 right here, to where you're going to go ahead and put on there for 1205 right there. And you want to know too is to where that why does that seem like more of a time to where that you would be going on your lunch break? That right there is supposed to be a cash dollar amount right there. But you want to know too that every time you think about that you're going to maybe be thinking about the time. And like everybody else would say too, that we're talking about by the year 2023, that we're going to be looking at those cash dollar amounts, and that you might look at that and at 102 that you're going to get that confused with the time. And you're likely 102 that really that unless if you're reading military time, you're not really going to even pay attention to where the fact about if it's 12:05 p.m. or if it's 12:05 a.m. But let's just say if that's supposed to be a cash dollar amount right there about how much money you make per hour. So if we were to actually round up these digits right here, and the U102 is to where that we're talking about within 2 years or so from now that a lot of that software would need to be updated, right? And people might say is to where that for where did you get these amounts right here? Because there is no amount any bigger than what's shown here, and so it sure seems that way that when we think about $100,000 right here, that we are actually seeing this right here is to where this right here is supposed to be the bigger number right here, right? Even though if it says 00 right there, and that this right here is supposed to say 500 right here, and we don't see zeros right there just because that those amounts right there would probably indicate to where 99 right there, but if they were less than that, then it would indicate 00. So the way we think about that though is that really if it's more or if it's less, but it sure seems that way that that like everybody else would say too, that if you see those numbers round up to bigger amounts, then chances are that somebody's going to say is toward that the numbers get to be bigger, and then maybe that they'll be good. Maybe if they see their allowance increase to where that for how much, to at least 5% or something. But so a lot of times it sure seems that way that like everybody else might say that you are able to, like, especially whenever we're talking about favors, and maybe if we're talking about offerings, and so a lot of times that offerings are just another way of stating to where I'm like, I can go and put that right here, an offering, that an offering. An offering is a way stating to where that a gift for giving, right? And it's like just for extra. And I know I see this a lot of times, especially whenever it comes to church and all that. But let's just say that if we can use that word or phrase, if we're talking about, that if we're talking about business, or if we're talking about credit cards or anything like that, billings and credit cards, and maybe even charities. So let's just say that if somebody is willing to give, I'm like, contributions, especially if it's especially if you're making any sorts of donations, especially. So it basically means is to where you give, you give, you make a donation, right? But if we're talking about offerings, so to where that somebody is willing to offer you a little bit of extra cash, just a little extra salary, if you are willing, I'm like, So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that if you were to start a conversation with somebody, and let's just say that if you could be just a little bit of assistance with somebody, and maybe just give them a little bit helpful tips or something like that, and it's like something. It maybe not even a guarantee, but a guarantee or anything. But let's just say that on average, though, that maybe about every 3 weeks or so, that if you want to look at that, to where that somebody were to offer you like any source of allowance or like a pay in a favor, and let's just say if it's every 3 weeks or something like that, well, really if we were to actually do the math right here, that are you you would be willing to offer a little bit of an allowance, just for a favor, or maybe if anything about which cause, like to where if somebody were to guess the right answer, or like just to try to explain it very clearly about how they were able to come up to those rounding facts. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that whenever it comes to whenever it comes to an offering, or like for the amounts that get bigger or smaller, right? And so for the most part, that if we're talking about that if somebody were to offer you I'm like, if somebody was asking you for a favor a lot of times, that how often are they going to really offer you a penny more or a dollar more just for doing something, just for doing a favor? And like most of the time, that's usually the case, right? That but how much would that be necessarily? And I guess you could say, would that be 2%, or would that be up to 5%? But like I say, 5% would more likely be is to where that if somebody allows it to where you can keep that $8. So let's just say that and let's just say that on average, though, that if it will be $8.99, somebody allows, somebody tells you that $8.99 right there, you can go ahead and keep that $8.99. So a lot of times it's like really, do most credit card companies do that to where that if you go ahead and pay that amount right there, and then let's just say if most credit card companies would say that is to where that $8.99 is your change, just because that you were able to pay, but still, I'm trying to tell everybody here, but still trying to if you're trying to highlight that right there, but that right there, $8.99. So let's just say that on average, though, the $8.99 is your change, if you are willing to pay that remaining balance right there. And let's just say if it is a credit card amount or interest amount or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that really about almost everybody else, can agree to pay $8.99 compared to the $20 right there. So let's just say on average though that if you got a bill statement of about of about 150.89 right here, and let's just say if you were to agree to pay $8.99, and how would that work? Well, most of the time that's over the fact if you have any points or credits that where you can redeem, and let's just say that if you could redeem any points, and most of the time that the remaining balance would be, I'm like, yeah, points or credits, and most of the time that's usually how it is. If you were approved any credits and any points and credits and all that, but it sure seems that way that talk about for $8.99, that $8.99, that will be the amount that you would pay, if you are willing to. I'm like, yeah. So it's like like everybody else would say too that why is it that $8.99 seems to be a reasonable price? Then compare like I'm like, yeah, you don't see, sometimes you don't even see $8.99. You just see $8 even. So let's just say that if we were to do the rounding digits right here, so like let's just say that like everybody else would say too, if you see $8 even right there, like yeah, that might not be a bill a lot of times, but let's just say that's your change right there. Yeah, you get paid if you took care of something for somebody, and let's just say that 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 $8 is your change right there. So you have that amount of money. I'm like, yeah, that's your change right there. So it's like, somebody. I'm like, yeah, to take care of something important, and let's just say if it was the equal amount of 20, and let's just say that if your change was $8, and they say that yeah, you can go and keep that $8 just for yeah. So I guess if you want to kind of look at that as just a little bit of interest, but I look at that more like an allowance. That's more just a little bit like kind of like an allowance, but really, if we all know what I'm talking about, that when we speak about understanding about the math facts though, that whenever it comes to understanding math though, that whenever it comes to whenever it comes to spending and earnings, and as well as getting like getting even, like, but still that on the other hand that when we talk about rounding our digits, so that it sure seems that way to where that are we going to necessarily think about that to where you go ahead and call the price, and then we'll go ahead and come up to an agreement. So it sure seems that way that I say that yeah, well, I don't make the prices, but on the other hand too that if you go ahead and call out that price and get everybody to agree on how much it is, and chances are, wouldn't that be the same thing as making a price? And people may say that, yeah, if you want to go ahead and underline that, so that way we can go and hear you right there. So it sure seems that way that when we do the math right here in 102 is to where that, really, is it really over the fact about trying to get everybody to agree about something? And a lot of times it sure seems that way that doing the math right here, that the highest amount that it goes to is not no 999 dot 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 999 dot 999 dot dot 999. And a lot of times it sure seems that I'm like, yeah, well, most of the time it's 000.000 comma, I'm like, yeah, comma 000.000.000.000, and you want to know too is if it's going to be hard to pronounce the point, to where that why don't you just give it a nickname to where that triple zeros, it reads the triple zeros, and why don't you just leave it at that, huh? But like everybody else might even say too that that if we're talking about getting the job done most of the time, it sure seems that way that that's usually the case. Whenever you're getting the job done, that it sure seems that way to where that yeah, you want to go ahead and read off the digits a lot of times, and it sure seems that way to where that yeah, well, really that are we really getting our fair share, or if it's really over the fact about it's best explained. But anyway, thanks for watching everyone, and have a great day.